Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's bonus, shall we? Tonight's first experience. To preface myself, this is not the one and only occasion in which I've encountered something beyond the strange, unusual, and unexplainable. I am, and always have been, an avid outdoors person who enjoys the woods, mountains, and general solitude in the wilderness. I would not claim myself to be afraid of the dark woods or nighttime in the mountains, nor am I superstitious in my everyday life. However, my personal experiences forced me to consider a wide and unorthodox realm of what is possible. This experience took place on Christmas Eve 2005. I was on break from University of Arizona my freshman year. Usually my parents, two sisters, and myself either host extended family or travel to be guests for family for Christmas. That Christmas we decided to spend a small holiday at home with just the five of us. Having gotten used to being a very active college student, I became restless, hanging around the house all day and night. I decided to take a nighttime hike at a nearby lake. I packed a bag, food for 2 days, a backpack, stove, extra winter clothes. The snow at my house was about 6 inches, so I expected at least 2 feet along the trail. And I tend to overpack because stuff happens when you're least prepared. It was roughly 10 p.m. when I left the house, and it took approximately an hour and a half to reach the lake. The lake and forest around it is roughly 8 to 10 miles east of the Navajo Nation as the crow flies. The trail I intended to hike was only 3.5 miles and led to a fire tower. I had hiked this trail a few dozen times since I was 7 or 8 and had become very familiar with the large portion of surrounding area. Because of this, I expected an easy and uneventful hike to tire me out and ease my restlessness. I'd pulled into the staging area of the trailhead, got out of the truck, grabbed my pack along with final checks for emergency essentials. I reached the trailhead, and as expected, the trail was untouched and covered with roughly 18 inches of snow. The snow was not really soft, but not really firm, and icy either. The crust of the snow broke easy under my boot steps, but did so with a very loud crunch that seemed to sharply crack in the cold, crisp silence of the night. Believe me, it was a very quiet night. Soon I fell into a nice, comfortable, but quick pace. An instinct hiking pace I have developed. The trail began in a very lightly wooded flat and slowly meandered into a moderately wooded dell that continued for a half a mile or so. At this time, I knew that switchbacks would begin to carry me up the hillside. I would estimate I was 75 to 100 yards from the first switchback when I noticed I had substantially slowed my pace and caught myself instinctually. Scanning the area in front of me, this is a posture I usually assume when I am hunting or stalking big game through the forest. After I caught myself the first time, I thought nothing of it. The second time I had caught myself doing the same thing was only a handful of moments later, as I was near the second switchback. This time I paid more attention to my gut and kneeled down next to a stump. Up until this time I was using only a headlamp that, when on high, as it had been, throws off enough light to carry a beam roughly 50 to 60 yards. As I knelt next to the stump, I flip up my headlamp red filter lens and turn the power setting to low, then proceed to listen carefully while scanning nearly 360 degrees around me. After 5 minutes or so, my eyes adjusted better to the darkness, and I caught a faint glow of red positioned roughly at the switchback in front of me. I decided to sit for a few minutes and continue to observe and listen while my eyes continued to adjust. The faint red glow never really seemed to disappear, but the intensity seemed to diminish at an irregular interval over the next few minutes. I grew impatient and surmised there was a trail or survey reflector at the switchback that was catching my red-filtered light. By the time I decided to stand up and proceed with my hike, I guess 10 minutes had passed. As I stood upright, I pulled out my medium handheld mag light, flipped my headlamp back to high, and switched it from red filter to white LED. It was at this point when my state went from relaxed and calm to a sudden jump in that fight or flight feeling that only an adrenaline dump can produce. My two lights had easily lit up the switchback where I was observing the faint red light. However, I did not see the reflector I had told myself was the origin of the glow. As I began to process of controlling my breathing and the feeling of panic and slowly stepped forward with uneasy suspicion, I noticed a red glow appearing several feet up the hill in front, just beyond the switchback and just beyond the beam of my two lights. Upon controlling my panic, I began to try and determine what this glow could be. The best new answer I came up with was that a reflection was from the eyes of some animal. This made sense to me, except I had never seen an animal with red reflecting eyes, and never with such a hazy glow. The tales of mountain lions that ran these mountains and reports of small packs of Mexican red wolves in this part of state made the choice for me to turn around and head back down the trail. I slowly turned around and slowly walked the path I had just come from no more than 15 minutes before. I thought it was a wise idea to keep my mag light shining behind me, with hopes that if this was a predatory animal, it might think I was facing it as of retreating. I had turned the corner and began to slowly walk to the base of the switchbacks. Again, I got within 30 to 40 yards of the last turn that led to a dell when I saw the glow, only this time I made out a distinct set of two red glows, with just enough space between them to make them distinct and separate from each other. This is when I confirmed it was an animal, which put me at ease but also worried me because it did not follow me but actually cut me off on the trail, as if knowingly intercepting me in my retreat. I stood there weighing my options and risks. I could continue moving forward down the trail and hope the bold move would keep a buffer of at least 20 yards between the animal and myself. This option made me the most uneasy, as I opted for my second best way out. I could cut straight down the hillside through the somewhat thick woods, risking a twisted ankle or a bad spill with all the forest litter, stumps, and wind-falled trees masked by the deep snow. It seemed like the way to go. I proceeded carefully but quickly through the woods and snow on the ground when I reached the bottom and connected back up with the trail. At this point, I knew I was a good mile from my truck, and it was a flat, easy mile. Half was through the dell, and the last half over the meadow. After only a couple of quick yards back to my truck, my gut told me to stop and turn around. I did just that. I cut off a few stew and kneeled next to the smallish pine tree. This time, I completely turned off my lamps and listened with intense concentration. My instinct told me the crust on the snow should break underfoot of anything larger than a rabbit or raccoon. My eyes had only begun to adjust to the darkness when I saw the two red glowing whatever emerge from where I imagined the last switchback was, and clearly but slowly moving away from the hillside. I tried to slow my breathing so I could better hear footsteps of this animal that seemed to be curiously pursuing me. I would guess it had moved a fair amount of distance closer to me, and I guess 100 yards from my position. It didn't seem to move with focused intent on me, but did seem to move with purpose. It was hard to judge distances accurately with such a low light, so I told myself to stay silent and watch for 15 more seconds. Out of nowhere, my brain seemed to have finally caught on to the fact that I had not heard a single sound since I had stopped. No snow crunching underfoot, not even a twig snapping, no sound that might suggest any animal moving through the winter night. Along with no sounds, I realized the red glow was not the reflection of eyes. There was no light to be reflected from an animal's eyes. So I finished my 15 seconds, stood up, turned, and took a few steps back to the trail where I turned my maglite and headlamp full on, and proceeded with the quick pass. This is where panic really started and stayed with me. Every 20 to 30 yards I would stop, turn around, and listen. After the second stop, it became clear the two red glows were following me, but staying just outside of the reach of the light beams. As much as I tried to control myself, panic continually pushed harder and harder to take control. So I began to pick up my pace. Whatever it was followed and remained outside of my lights. After several minutes of escalating panic and on the verge of a dead run, I could see my headlights slightly reflecting the white LED light of my headlamp. I knew I was within 100 yards of safety and escape, but as before, something screamed to stop, kill the lights, kneel, and listen. I did just that, but now, being in the meadow, I couldn't stop next to a stump or tree to help break my silhouette. So I kneeled down and concentrated. This time, the red glows continued to move slowly closer. I expected they stayed out of my beam, which was roughly 60 yards from me, so that's where I figured they would stay even with my lamps off. No such luck. The pair of close-set red glows came just close enough to me that my eyes could not make out a figure, shadow, silhouette, or make any distinctions between what they were and the night in the forest. The speed of which the two had closed the 60 yards or so was outstandingly quick, and without a sound to go with it, or any other movement you may associate with something running at you. I could do nothing but watch in awe as they stopped and began to grow in intensity. As the intensity grew, they elevated themselves from roughly 2 feet off the snow to what I guess would be 10 feet off the snow. At this point, the brightness of each seemed to peak, the brightness of a desk lamp. The light shone off the snow, the tree butts, to either side, but it did not seem to shine on objects behind it. After reaching this peak height in brightness, the two very slowly separated, maintaining everything about them except the distance from each other. They finally stopped 6 feet from each other, and just as they stopped, a third red glow came quickly up behind them and stopped right in line with the original two. I can't say if this third one literally appears out of nowhere somewhere by the base of a hill or if it had come the same route I had just traveled, but I had noticed it because I was so focused on the two right in front of me. However, it came about I instantly decided the best idea was to get up, book it back to the truck, so I did just that. I ran as fast as I felt I ever had. No light and all. I crashed recklessly through the snow with panic-driven focus, only to get to my truck. When I finally reached the truck, I jumped in, turned the key, and immediately switched on my high beams. The three were still able to stay just out of the beams of my headlights. I backed out and left down the snow-packed forest road. My truck's four-wheel drive was already engaged from the drive-in, so I drove as quick as I could. After the first mile or so, I figured I had left the red glows behind, but continued to obsessively check my mirrors. I checked and saw a faint haze glow from two, and when I put my attention back to the road, I saw the third just beyond my high beams. I tried to remain controlled of my fear so I could maintain control of my truck. The three stayed in their initial positions the 20 minutes it took to get down the mountain, but upon reaching the small community at the bottom, they simply vanished. They didn't fade away or slowly peel away from me. They were there, and then they were gone. At this time, I was so relieved I was off the mountain, out of the forest, and no longer being followed, and regained cell service. I began to shake and pretty much lose all composure. The feeling of absolutely no control over myself or emotions came over me, and all I could do was continue to drive. I called my parents to let them know I was heading home and made it off the mountain. My mom apparently heard the strain and stress in my voice and pushed the matter. I struggled through the short and rattled version of what had happened. By this time, it was pushing 1:30 in the morning. She instructed me to come straight home, and I had no other thoughts but doing just that. Before she hung up, she told me to call a family friend who lived in the area and knew it very well and was Navajo like my family and I are. So I called him, woke him up, but this time around, I am able to deliver more detailed, more concise, and less emotional account of what happened to me in the previous hour or more. My experience was like nothing he had ever heard of before. By the time our conversation was finished, I was still 20 minutes from my home, still adrenaline pumping through my system and no answers. I sat there and thought about it over and over again. When I got home, I tried, but sleep never came. Christmas Day was a dull passing of hours. I thought only of what had clearly chased me and all of the odd and wild aspects of the glowing things. That I truly did, without a doubt. I did not sleep for another 2 nights after that Christmas Eve. After that night, I saw a few people who knew the area very well and asked if they saw or heard anything odd out there. Some said no, and others came up with what seemed to me as a generic ghost story that happened to a cousin or a friend. I passed these off as nonsense camp tales, so to this day I have no answers or hints as to what that was that night. Over the years, I have been able to put it back together as closely as I can remember, and some of the things I knew I saw and felt are things I cannot shake. I have never felt such fear and lack of control over anything as I did in that moment when I realized the 3 red glows were gone. I maintained so much more control over myself during the actual event than I did when I thought it was over. I've not returned to that area since that night, not strictly out of fear and apprehension, but I also never had a reason to go up there since. Tonight's second encounter. Back when I was in high school, there was a wooded area north of us nicknamed Salem's Lot that was widely believed to be haunted. I have no idea where these stories originated from, but they ranged from whispers about KKK murders to unburied dead wandering about after dark. One of the most common stories involved a pioneer-era graveyard that was moved from the site to another graveyard north of the woods. This allegedly disturbed the spirits of those buried there and resulted in the area being cursed. We often partied there during high school and never had a single paranormal experience there until one night, the summer of '93. I'd just gotten my first car and was driving around with a friend, Spam, we'll call them. After getting bored of driving aimlessly with nothing to do, Spam suggested we drive up to the lot. Having had been there a couple of years, I agreed and set off to find the old graveyard road that led to the woods. Arriving to the area where the old graveyard road led into the woods, we found it, gone, literally as if it had never existed. I assumed we came to the wrong area and set off to try and locate it. We turned north on Salem Road and eventually came to the new graveyard that the pioneer graves were allegedly moved to. We parked the car and started to explore the graveyard. After a while, we were walking back to my car when suddenly Spam told me to keep six. To anyone who does not know this, keep six is slang that means I am about to do something sketchy, so make sure nobody is around to catch us. At the time, we were approximately 20 yards from my car, and the graveyard sloped down away from us. I could clearly see down Salem's road, both to the north and south, where we drove from. I glanced both ways and turned to see what the hell Spam was up to. I looked down, and Spam had a tire iron and was attempting to pry the footstone from the grave. He stopped in front. I just had enough time to process what he was doing and let out a "WTF are you doing?" before we heard a voice behind us. "Can I help you boys with something?" I spun around to see an old man who looked to be in his 70s standing not 10 feet from us, and saw the man's pickup truck was parked next to my car. I was quite unnerved, as I could not understand how this seemingly frail old man could have drove up silently, parked his truck, and walked the 50 feet to us in 20 seconds since Spam had said keep six. Unnerved, I stammered out, "No, man. We're just looking around," as Spam tried to covertly stuff the tire iron into his pants. Nervously, I asked if he was the caretaker. The man replied, "Nope, I'll just sit on the board," and looked at us like he knew we were up to no good. We quickly muttered that we were leaving and walked back to my car. The old guy followed, got in his truck, and drove south down Salem Road. "WTF did that mean?" asked Spam. Neither of us had a clue what board the old guy could have been a part of, and we were unnerved by how he suddenly appeared out of nowhere in his strange reply. I put the car in gear and headed south down Salem Road, following the path the old guy took. We drove until we almost reached the railway bridge at the southernmost part of the road, when suddenly we saw the old guy. He had parked his truck in the middle of the road at the threshold of the bridge. He was leaning against his tailgate facing us with a stern look and his arms crossed. I slammed on the brakes and sat there watching him watch us for a moment before putting the car in reverse and driving the back we came. We pondered the creepiness of the old guy as we drove the long way around back to where the entrance to the lot used to be. I parked the car over where I was sure the gravel road used to be and got out. Spam grabbed a bag out of the back of the car that had a knife and a dime-store copy of the Necronomicon in it. We stared off into the woods, walked between two rows of cedar trees that skirted a farmer's field on our left. Eventually, the path we were following turned right between two trees that had odd symbols painted on them, likely from kids. We continued following the path until the woods opened up to a cornfield on our left, and the path we were following intersected another path to the right that led through the woods and across an old mill we used to party at back in high school. However, I couldn't understand how the road that we used to drive on had quite literally disappeared in the 2 or 3 years since the last time being there. Suddenly, Spam got another bright idea that was apparently inspired by the arcane symbols we saw painted on the trees. Pulling out the Necronomicon, he suggested we carve a symbol from the book into the ground to scare anyone coming here. I shrugged as he chose a demonic symbol from the book and started etching it out on the ground with the knife. Suddenly, he called me over to see something. 2 or 3 inches in the ground, he found something hard. We dug into it with the knife and pulled up asphalt. We wondered why anyone would pour asphalt in the ground and cover it with dirt in the middle of the woods, unless they were trying to hide something. We both started digging using our hands, and the knife work was slow going, but as the sun set, we had quite the hole dug. At that point, we lit 2 fires on either side of the hole so we could better see what we were doing. However, as the sun set, we were having a hard time seeing anything. I have no idea what possessed us so badly to dig at that hole, but suddenly stopped and suggested going home and getting a shovel. Spam agreed, and we started throwing dirt from the hole onto the fires we had lit so we could see better. Suddenly, as the last bit of fire was extinguished, I heard what sounded like a dog barking on the far side of the cornfield. The dog barked louder and sounded like a bunch of dogs barking, then a few more until it sounded like 100 hounds barking and snarling. The sound was getting louder and louder as it came across the cornfield at us. Within seconds, it went from sounding like it was a half a mile away to sounding it was 50 feet in front of us and closing in fast. The barking, snarling had another quality about it, like what a loose fan belt sounds like in the winter, that more of a squealing-like sound. But now, this hellish racket was louder than any concert I have ever attended. I've seen the Ramones live when they were together. Terrified, I turned to Spam and screamed, "WTF is that?" but was unable to hear my own voice over the deafening cacophony. Spam looked at me with a face white as a ghost, turned and fled back down the path we had came. The next thing I remember was being in the pitch black halfway back to the car and holding a large stick in my hand like a club. The hellish noise had been replaced by an unholy silence. Not a cricket nor another creature could be heard in the summer night. We hastily made our way back to the car, where my hands were shaking so bad I couldn't get the key in. Opening the door, I unlocked Spam's door, started the car, and flipped on the high beams. Nothing happened. For whatever reason, the headlights simply didn't work. I put the car in drive and floored it out of there. After we got 50 yards down the road, the headlights came on by themselves. I drove another 20 minutes, pulled the car over, and asked Spam, "WTF just happened?" We never did find out what came after us that night. Truth be told, I don't really want to know. That night changed my perception of what is real and make-believe in this world, and shook the very foundation of my belief system. You can choose to disbelieve this, but I know what I experienced in the lot that night. And it was not just some junkyard dog or a random coyote pack. And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed this night-ending bonus as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps this channel to continue to grow and go. And honestly, what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.